We are so very, very honored to be here with Max Glauben, who not only is a Holocaust survivor, a survivor of a Shoah, but he is of that generation that allowed the rest of us to be here as Jewish people, as proud Jewish people. First of all, I want to just thank everybody for being on this call and joining us here today. I'm honored to be here with all of you, the same as all of you. This is in observation of the Holocaust, and today we're here in honor of Holocaust survivor Max Glauben. It's hosted by the truly fabulous Israeli Parliament Minister Omer Yankelevi, and in attendance, there are so many invited guests from Israel and from the United States, including university students. The reason it's important to have university students on this call is because we keep, as Jews, we keep focusing on Dor Haba. What is the next generation going to do? And that's why the stories that Max is going to share with us is so important, because the responsibility is no longer only on Max to make sure that our people thrive and that our people survive. And it's not only on Minister Yankelevich to make sure that she leads our people, but it's on you, it's on the students, it's on the next generation. So we are only here to guide you and create the platform for us to have a conversation. I am so very honored to now pass this Zoom microphone over to Minister Omer.
תודה רבה, יובל. Good evening, ערב טוב. Thank you for leading this important discussion. תודה רבה ושלום לכולם. Hello, everyone. This conversation brings us together across generations, communities, and time zones to listen, to connect, and to reflect. It is such an honor to be joined by Israeli students from Ben-Gurion University. שלום לכם, סטודנטים יקרים, ותודה רבה לכם שאתם פה איתנו. And our speaker, dear speaker, Mr. Max Glauben, thank you very, very much for having this time with us. תודה רבה. Mr. Max's story is not only about his incredible bravery and resilience during the Holocaust. It is about the proud Jewish life, community, and legacy that Max continues to build as a leader and advocate for tolerance. In Israel, many of us don't have the opportunity to engage with Holocaust survivors who build their lives outside of Israel. As we will hear, building Jewish identity and community for Holocaust survivors in America came with a completely different set of challenges and opportunities. From his home in Dallas, Texas, Max has shared and inspired so many young people. He founded Dallas' first Holocaust Center in 1984. During non-COVID times, Max leads young people on march of the living trips to Auschwitz and Birkenau and then to Israel. And his memoir, his book, sharing his story and message will be out in March, Bezrat Hashem. Survivors such as Max enriched their Jewish communities with an important connection to the past. But they also, this is the most important part, they create a sense of responsibility and shared purpose for the future, for our future. After today, each and every one of us will have been empowered with the story and inspiration shared today. Let us use this evening as a reminder of our shared work as a Jewish people, whether in Israel or Texas, to together bring light to places where they're in darkness. And in our times, it is not hard to find the darkness. Letzari, unfortunately. Mr. Max, Thank you for sharing your story with us today. Thank you for being a shining example of what it means to raise one's voice and never back down. Toda rabba.
One of the beautiful things that Omer just shared is the toda. It's the appreciation, because we recognize that we are in this together. My name's Yuval David, and not only am I an actor and TV host and filmmaker, but I'm an advocate. I'm an advocate because I need to be. My work isn't my own. My life isn't my own. I am of a family, which means I am of them and I am for them. And I'm of and for my community, and I am of and for my people. This I learned from my grandparents, my own grandparents, who are well-known heroes, Holocaust survivors, and who taught me that old ancient Jewish expression, the idea that if you take one twig, you can easily break that twig. But when you hold a bundle of twigs together, you cannot break it. And that's what all of us are doing here today. That is what Minister Omer's Toda is about. It's saying thank you for being here together. Thank you for joining in together. And now the big thank you is for Max Glauben to speak, to share his remarks. And I have to say, there's so much that Max can share with us. I also implore you to check out Jory Epstein's book, who wrote the book, The Upstander, How Surviving the Holocaust Sparked Max Glauben's Mission to Dismantle Hate. And that is what we all need to do, to dismantle hate. The Holocaust is something that Max Glauben's generation went through, that they survived and allowed us to be here. The Holocaust can not only be forgotten if we don't deal with it. So yes, we say always remember, we say always, and we say never forget, but we also have to always take action. So Max, you have always taken action. I now pass the microphone to you, so to speak, to hear the words that you have to share with all of us.
Thank you very much for building me up to the point where I'm going to have to put a crown on my head. But people have to realize that life is like weather, the stock market, or any activity. It goes up and down at certain times. We never go in one straight line. There are always detours that put us on a different road. First, I want to thank the American Army that saved me. Now we're talking about Jewishness and creating Jewish life. Look how many of us were liberated singularly because we lost our family, but then decided to keep on going without giving up. So if I call a restaurant right now and want to make a reservation when all my family is here, I have to make a reservations for at least 23 or 4, and I might be missing somebody. I myself were born on January 14, 1928, and I know for a fact it was a Friday night, so maybe I'm a Shabbos baby, but I never thought about it until just this minute, because many thoughts come into your mind while you're speaking. I lived a very nice life. My father was starting in a new type of religion that was called Agudist, where they eliminated the pious and some of the articles that the really Hasidic Jews were doing. Now, I never got an education, so I'm doing this from memory. And some of these things were authenticated by Jory Epstein of whatever I put in the book. We want to make sure that it was 100% true. My father was a part, and I know that he was a part owner because the family was a publishing newspaper family. My grandfather published the Yiddish Express in Warsaw, and my dad published the Dallas. My dad, Das Yidische Tagblatt. And when I went to the museum in Warsaw, Poland, the new museum, I found the newspaper, the front page of one of the newspapers, and I was able to obtain it. And I think it was dated September 28, 1938. And the headline says, Adolf Hitler meets Mr. Chamberlain. I lived in the Warsaw Ghetto once it was made the ghetto. I lived on Mila 38, apartment 43. There was a coal yard right across from our apartment, which means that the apartment was only 3/4, and a quarter of it was a coal yard and wood yard, and they had a little horse and a wagon. The horse's name was Lalka, which means a doll in Polish. When the ghetto was on, that wagon had a permission to go out and either get supplies to be manufactured in the Warsaw Ghetto, or for coal, or for some of the necessities that at the beginning were brought into the Warsaw Ghetto by the Germans. And then it also did the finished products out to either certain places or sometimes to railroad cars. And this is how I was able to get involved secretly in smuggling. I lived in the ghetto until 1943. I don't like to talk about many horrible things because sometimes we are singing to the choir, because all this is publicized and the deniers will deny it, but we as Jews and the people that are normal will understand of what it is. I was living in the apartments, or we were living in the apartments on Mila 38. There were many restrictions. When it got, the longer it lasted, the rougher it's got. Diseases, any disease in the ghetto known to mankind was in epidemic stages. We didn't have enough doctors. We didn't have enough medication. If we wanted to live a life and cook something in our apartments, we used coal with wooden stoves with a few layers that reduced the size of the hole that was heated something. Well, what happens when you use wood? Smoke comes out of the chimney. So if we cooked something, so we had to change our lifestyle. We made the basements that we used for bomb shelters were converted into hiding places. And we switched day into night. And this is in a short way that I can explain that life has completely changed. So we could cook on fireplaces and do a lot of things at night that we could not do in the daytime because it was visible to all Germans, but not so much to the neighbors because they were all Jewish. But before the ghetto was started, any German that would turn in a Jew received a certain amount of money. This lasted till 1939, where on April 19, the underground resisted the Germans, and they tried to bring in artillery and everything to the ghetto unsuccessfully, because the resistance was compiled of squads of youngsters between ages of 18 and 25, and they held back the Germans from April 19 till the end of May. And some of the Jews were able to cross over to the Polish area, but most of us were discovered out of the basements that were burning and placed in a spot where all the Jews were confined, called the Umschlagplatz, loaded on boxcars, no less than 100, for a journey that lasted at least 5 days or longer. If we are not telling the truth about 5 days, were you ever in trouble for even an hour or two, but it seemed like it was a week or 5 days. But in our case, it was 5 days, and we finally ended up in Majdanek. In Majdanek, we were offloaded, and the Germans had a station on the line that was unloading us. And if you were a woman with a child, you went into the ovens. If you were a human being that was male, or maybe even sometimes a woman, single, that was capable of performing any kind of work for them, and they had requisitions for how many people they needed for the work camps and to commit something, to do something for the Germans. After we were offloaded from the boxcar, we were told, women and children forward, and the march started. That's the last time I saw my mom, my little brother, who were in front of us with some of my relatives. In fact, 2 relatives of mine, 2 of my father's sisters were in that group. And 42 years after the Holocaust, they found me in Dallas, Texas. Both are deceased now. The last one died last year at the age of 99. I'm telling some of these things while I remember when I'm speaking. I never saw my mom again, but my father was right next to me, behind my mom and my little brother. He grabbed my hand and he says, stay with me, don't go there. And sure enough, they selected him to go to a camp next to an aeroplane factory in Buzin, Poland. The trips that I made to all the camps were all into camps that were built next to airplane factories. The Heinkel and the Messerschmitt. And I was able, because I'm very mechanically inclined, to work on parts for the airplane. So if they needed to be replaced on the original plane, they could be manufactured and replace them to fix them so they could fly again. I stayed in Budzin for about 3 weeks. We went out on a trip and to the factory. We would march in the morning, we'd be counted. I am omitting many activities, but giving you an outline. So anyways, we went out in the morning and we came back at night. When we came back at night, we didn't get food when we were hungry, only when they wanted us to eat, and that was back in camp. We couldn't go to the restroom when we wanted. So at the end of the day, they would let us into the restroom. And do you know how long it's going to take you? You never know. But the guards sometimes wouldn't wait for you to finish, so they left. When we left that day, there were 3 people missing. When they went through the gate, they says, you have 3 people missing. We're taking 10 hostages for each person that's missing. But it wasn't a regular count. It was just a head count over the gate. So they took 30 hostages, laid them out on the ground. They rushed everybody else in, so they took my father as a hostage. When I got up in the morning, in the spot that he was laying were only his shoes. I don't know how he was killed or what was done, but I never wanted to give the Germans satisfaction that they hurt me. And I'm a strong believer in God, and I was always thought that if you save one life, it's the same way if you save the whole world in our religion. So I says, I'm going to do what they want me to do. And maybe if I could sabotage something, I would sabotage. But you know, there were good record keepers. Any part that I worked on, I had to put my number on. But at one time, they had youngsters in Poland, like Hitler Youth, they were called Junaki. They would come into work and they would make me do their parts so they could finish up. And sometimes they messed up and my number was on the part. So I quit doing it. I went from Budzin to Mielec, not knowing to me that the camps were being closed. So I went from Budzin to Mielec. Then they took us all, and I worked in Mielec, but then they took us all to Wieliczka, the salt mines. But that time they had too many people there for facilities, for food, and for work. So there were sometimes, how you call it, bodies laying all around the camp for lack of food and lack of sanitary conditions and lack of any place where you could sleep without. There were just thousands of bodies laying around there. They finally get it around the ones that were alive, put us on the train, and took us to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Auschwitz-Birkenau had tracks full of people that were brought there for finishing. They took us to Plaszow. There's thousands of bodies over there. So they never unloaded us, but sent us directly to Flossenburg, Germany, where I stayed from, I think it was May the 8th, 1944, until April the 23rd, 1945. We were taken from Flossenburg on a boxcar that was shot up by the Allies 3 times, and most of us killed. Then there was a group of maybe 200 or 300 that started marching from Flossenburg, Germany, or from Floss, Germany, in the direction of Dachau. We marched at night. At dusk, they put us into the woods, and from March 16 to April 23rd. On April the 16th was the only Jewish transport out of Flossenburg. All the others were either mixed with some of the Jews that might have hidden from being taken out on the 16th. We landed in a place then that I never can remember, but I can get it from my phone. And it was, anyways, I got a minute where I cannot remember this, but the second part was Balbini. And over there, they put us on a hill and told us we were surrounded with machine guns. That was after the march. And when this was in the morning, New Kürzen, Balbini is the place that I was liberated. In the middle of the day, we heard a noise that was different than aircraft, and 7 or 8 of us, got up enough strength to stand up and see if we can run down the hill and scatter. Maybe the Germans won't shoot us with the machine guns. When we did that, to find out who was coming into the town with all the noise, it were American tanks, and the Germans evidently realized who it was, so they tore off their swastikas and all the identification and left us free. The Germans wouldn't let us into their homes, so we started walking because the soldiers said, go and try to find a place where the Allies will make displaced person camps for you. So what happened? We were marching in the country that has a lot of fruit, and the fruit wasn't ripe. So many of us got sick from eating the apples that they had, because in Bavaria they make apple cider. But finally, as we were marching, a convoy of United States Army came behind us. It was 179 Signal Repair Corps with a Jewish lieutenant, basic, second lieutenant. And he says, keep your mouth shut. I'm giving you uniforms and you are my helpers. And we roamed with him to Nuremberg, Germany, where they went into a caserne that was abandoned by the Germans. And I lived there for 2 years, from 1945 to 47. I learned how to speak English. I became a mess sergeant, doing food for Polish guards that were over 200, and God knows how many German prisoners that were assigned to that caserne. In 1947, I was able to talk to the US committee, go into an orphanage in a Gloucester house in Germany, from there be transported to the United States on a permanent visa, arrived in New York, went into an orphanage. People weren't too nice to us in New York. I says, get me out of here. And people didn't have any opening till December, last day in December of 1947. And I was taken to Atlanta, Georgia. And I lived in a foster home, which I didn't know it was. It was with a Miss Rosenthal. And after a few weeks, I got out and I got a job with Sears Roebuck and did other things. And I couldn't live under the conditions where the Jewish Children's Service was taking care of me.
Max, if I might interrupt you for a moment, how old were you at this time? How old were you when?
I was born in 1928, so you take 1947. By that time, I must have been 19.
Right. So, Max, at the start of the war, in this story, which is just abbreviated part of your whole story, I understand how challenging it is to try to encapsulate something like this. Because we do have many young people on this call, on this Zoom call, for them to visualize this story is challenging. Even when we hear your story, how old were you when you first were taken in?
Around 11-ish.
So you managed to survive at age 11 and in those youthful years.
That is correct. And when I was liberated, I was maybe 17. Then when I had to register for the draft, I was 18. And when I was inducted into the US Army, was 51.
Wow.
I had to sign up for 5 years, serve 2 years on active duty, 3 years in active reserve. When I got out after the 2 years of active duty, I married Frida, who I met in Fort Hood, Texas, in Dallas, while I was stationed in Fort Hood, Texas.
So, Max, I actually have heard a lot about Frida, and I look forward to asking you some more questions about life continuing after that. Before I ask you these other questions and we dive even deeper and let more people ask you questions and try to take as much knowledge from you, it would be lovely for me to introduce Avinoam Drix. Avinoam has a very special musical performance to share with all of us. Nothing can top you, Max, and the stories that you shared. But let us try to delight you with.
I see I went over my time, but
you can. It's so hard to interrupt you. I could listen to you speaking endlessly.
Let me just finish up.
Please.
Something what I accomplished, and I'm gonna shut up. Great question. So, when I married Frida, we have 3 beautiful children, 2 males. There was a male, a female, and then another male. They all have married. I have 7 grandchildren and 3 great grandchildren. I was involved in completing the Holocaust Museum, which is one of the finest, and I consented to be in the hologram in that museum, so anybody can see me after I'm gone. And I also, in 2019, accomplished to be the Texan of the Year by the Dallas Morning News, and SMU gave me a doctorate without studying. I am a doctor of human letters. Anybody can look it up. So that will kind of complete of what I am at this point. Now you can get whoever you want.
Max, I will take direction from you always and forever.
I just didn't want them to think that they missed. There are many little bitty things that one never tells. I had to have my stomach out, and there were other things health-wise. But as long as every survival from either an illness, an accident, is a victory, like the liberation. So if you feel bad and you survive, then you feel good. It's a victory. So we live with good and bad, and that's what we have in us.
That's so true.
To us to be the upstanders and use the good and not use the bad.
That's why the book, The Upstander, how surviving the Holocaust sparked how it survived Max Glauben's mission to dismantle hate, what it means to be an upstander and not a bystander, not to stand by, but to stand up and to move forward. Max, your story is a story of truly unimaginable challenges. We hear your story. We can read about it in your book. We have, like myself, grandparents who are Holocaust survivors. I was raised with these stories. So it is what we do now. It is what we do next. So now I am so honored to introduce Avinoam Drix, depending on if you're in America or in Israel, how you pronounce his name. What we do now is we do something with the stories and the inspiration that you give us. So Avinoam, please, and here is Avinoam.
Thank you very much. Thank you. הולך אני כעת במשעול העובר, כילד ההולך לו לאיבוד, כפות ידיין מושטות מבקשות את העזרה, להמשיך איתך את המסע. ובצדדים הפרחים כאילו איבדו את זהותם, מחפשים עוד קרן אור שתעזור, עוד לגימה קטנה של מים ממעייני החוכמה, תביא להם את התקווה. הרים ראשי, אשא עיניי אל ההרים במרחקים, וקולי יישמע כזעקה כתפילת האדם, וליבי יקרא, מאין יבוא עזרי. עובר אני כעת בנופים חדשים, הצעדים הם נעשים כה איטיים. מה יש שם שאין פה? שאל אותי עובר. מה בלב אתה שומר? קשיש העיר שעל גבו מונח כל עברו, מביט סביב ומחפש את עולמו. כשההווה כל כך קשה, לא אומר דבר, ארים ראשי אל המחר. ארים ראשי, אשא עיניי אל ההרים במרחקים, וקולי יישמע כזעקה, כתפילת האדם, וליבי יקרא, מאין יבוא עזרי. ארים ראשי, אשא עיניי אל ההרים במרחקים, וקולי יישמע כזעקה, כתפילת האדם, וליבי יקרא, מאין יבוא עזרי. יבוא עזרי. Thank you very, very much.
תודה רבה.
Wow, Avinoam.
Wow, toda.
Thank you, Avinoam. That the heartfelt song helped me transition back into this world we live in after hearing Max's story. Minister Omer, I know that you are very good at speaking because it's your job. And right now, as I'm at an emotional loss for words, I'm transitioning back to you to share your thoughts.
Daraba. Thank you very much. You know, there are moments that, as you said, we have to be a second quiet. So I want to thank you all for participating in this moving discussion and this moving evening. Mr. Max, your story leaves us all so inspired. Your sense of purpose and an example of what it means to live a life of meaning and action. Thank you. Toda rabba. Thank you for lifetime, for your commitment to combating hate and building bridges inside and outside of the Jewish life. Toda rabba. I look forward to reading your book. Thank you to the performer Avinoam. Wow, for your moving performance. תודה, אתה כל כך מרגש, באמת, בחסד עליון. קיבלת מתנה, יש לך הכל נפלא, תודה. ואתם, חבר'ה צעירים, thank you to all the students for taking time away from your studies to be a part of this important discussion. And I hope that you will continue this evening to talk about this important issue. I hope we can all take this special evening and use it not just to say never again, but to inspire our mission to strengthen the Jewish people and our shared world. I look forward to meeting all of you, et kolchem, in person, face to face. It's a little bit hard to be in Zoom, but I hope to meet you or in Be'er Sheva or in Dallas. Be'ezrat Hashem in the coming days. Be'ezrat Hashem. You know, we say Max bez 120, ad 120, and I hope to meet you as soon as we can, face to face. Toda rabba again for the moving evening. Thank you very much, Mr. Max, and thank you very much to all of you. Toda rabba, ותודה רבה יובל על ההנחיה הנהדרת. Thank you very much. תודה.
תודה רבה לך. תודה רבה לכולם. Thank you, everybody. As our wonderful minister was just wrapping this up, It's about what we do next. Minister Omer is here for all of us. That's her job and her duty. So there's that expression, help me help you. What can we do together to help each other? Because Max shared his story of survival and continues to create these efforts to help all of us. So now the question is for everybody on this call and everybody who's watching, what are you going to do about this? It is easy to reach out to Minister Omer and all of her team. It is easy to reach out to Max Glauben, to read his book, to share his book, to share his story. What are you going to do about it? Never again. Always remember and always take action. Thank you for including me in your event, and thank you for this incredibly moving experience beyond words.
Toda rabah to you. And I must add that each individual that saw what I said, I did it all as a non-profit because I wanted to do it. And they are also available to participate in the non-profit and make this a better world.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.